Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Angela Puca and welcome to the Livestream Symposium. I'm a PhD and a university lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, esotericism, occultism, paganism, shamanism, and all religious or spiritual traditions that involve some kind of magic, which is my core interest, my core research interest. So I'm really glad to see a few of you in the chat. Hi Hank and Andrew and Joao. Yeah, yesterday I managed to actually go on a on a walk with my former supervisor and now colleague Susan Owen, and we went to the RHS. I always get confused with acronyms. It was near Arrogate, and it was sort of a botanical garden, and there was some bird watching going on, and it's, bird watching fascinates me, but I'm really bad at it. But I was able to recognize a jay that got closer to me than I anticipated, and also I managed to see 2 magpies, so I was quite happy about it. I don't know what you're doing this weekend, but let me just say hi to a few of you guys. I already said hi to Andrew and Joao. I see a few of my patrons in the chat, which is really nice. And Hank, Joshua. Hello, Joshua. Let me see who else is there. And as always, thank you to Academic Police for supervising the whole situation. Hello, Gothic Extravaganza. I noticed that lately you have become a poet in my comment section. Hello, Inquisitor Vex and Thomas Tate. Hi, Reziel. And Michael Jones, and hi Radori. Oh, Radori says Angela found you just recently. Oh, I'm glad that you found me and welcome to the symposium. Hello, Ken Romero. I just a few days ago got the acceptance of my paper at the EASR conference, which is the European Association for the Study of Religions, because among academics we tend to use these acronyms, but outside of our circle I'm aware that people don't know what this means. But I got my paper accepted for the presenting at the European at the conference of the European Association for the Study of Religions, and also at the ESWI conference, which is the European the European Association for the Study of Western Esotericism, and they are both at the University College Cork between June and July. So I will be spending like a couple of weeks there, which is nice. Maybe I'll manage to see Dublin as well. So hi Dr. Enol Almog Yerden. Gothic Extravaganza says, my good doc, I'm glad you like my poetry. I'm ever the artist and could send you other works on Instagram if you want. Yeah, feel free to. Frater Zygmunt says, the Austin Osman Spare video was so good. Thank you for all your hard work. Oh, thank you so much. It's always nice to to see my work appreciated. And yeah, that was a special video because it was also a collaboration with Justin, Dr. Sledge from Esoterica. And but yeah, I think that Austin Osman Spare is really interesting. Actually, I'd like to cover him more in terms of art. I think one of the things that I'd like to do more is art and occultism in different ways, but it's one of those things that requires more time, and so it's always difficult to find the time. That's always my main issue, finding the time to do everything that I want to do. But yeah, that would be a great project to expand more the study of esotericism here on Angela Symposium, to include more art. I have a video on music, well, Satanism and metal, and but yeah, there are more things that could be said about music and esotericism, and same goes for different forms of art. I think the art and esotericism are very intertwined. I think there are also a few academic conferences on art and esotericism. So, are there any questions yet? Or are you guys discussing amongst yourself? Let me see. Yeah, I'm glad that you guys really enjoyed Spa's video. I think that that time in the history of esotericism was very fertile, in the early to mid 20th century. It was really a turning point because, well, of course, a seminal and foundational character is Aleister Crowley, because a lot of esoteric thought, and even certain methodologies and certain ways of approaching the occult have some kind of relation to his thought and his practice. Even though I know that now he's a controversial figure, but it's definitely essential to the understanding of the development of contemporary esotericism, but also paganism, because Wicca was also influenced by Aleister Crowley. So let me see the chat box. Oh, Greg says you're a new patron and subscriber. Hi, Doctor. Oh, thank you, Greg. I hope you're liking our inner symposium so far. Oh, Radory talks about chaos shaman. That's interesting. It's the combination between shamanism and chaos magic. There are some elements of yeah, you already see some overlaps between chaos magic and shamanism that I discussed in my video, the first video that I did on chaos magic and its philosophy. Andrew has a question. Up until recently, most Western historicists were monotheists. How much has the recent adoption of polytheism or even atheism changed esoteric practice? That's a good question. I think that it depends whether you really want to distinguish how to define the Western historicists. That could be perhaps I think that you have always, across history, there are always magic practitioners, if we want to call them that way, that were monotheists or polytheists or animist. Perhaps atheism is a bit more recent. I think I'm not an expert in the history of atheism, because that's not what I study academically. But from if you look at the history of the practice of magic and the occult, you find everything really in terms of the religious underpinning of those practices. You find monotheists and polytheists, but I think that I know what you mean. You mean more in terms of the so-called historic circles, because for instance in folk magic in Europe, you find that a lot of vernacular healers of cunning folks, they were monotheists and they would still practice magic. But maybe your question is more in reference to things like ceremonial magic and more institutionalized forms of esotericism. But maybe I think that the most interesting development could be the atheist witches, and whether witchcraft can be actually sort of deprived of the or disentangled from religious entities or spirits. because some might think it's not possible, and others obviously argue that it is indeed possible. So we, in terms of, from an academic point of view, we need more research and more data to establish what are the patterns of meaning that are created by the community. But I think that perhaps that's more interesting than that moving from monotheism to polytheism, because from in my perception, I think that you've always found both monotheism and polytheism as religious underpinning to esoteric practices. But yeah, atheism perhaps is more of a new phenomenon, I think. Let me see if there are. Oh, I just saw Reziel talking about Hecate. Well, Hecate is the subject of my paper at the European conference, so you will definitely see more on Hecate. Another thing that I have lined up is I posted that on Instagram in a story on Instagram, and I think that I also got tagged by Adam Booth. Adam Booth is a geophysicist from the University of Leeds, and he has his very interesting series of events at a pub here in Leeds called Quantum Sauce. And usually he gathers like 3 scholars that talk about a common theme from the perspective of their research expertise. And so there is an event on the 24th of March, in case any of you is around Leeds and you want to come and see it. It's an event on spring. And so the other 2 scholars will talk about, I think, climate change and fertility, and I will be talking about the spring equinox and pagan practices around the spring equinox. And I was thinking perhaps of also, doing a bit of a little ritual perhaps on stage. There's a stage there, yes. But yeah, we will see. Maybe I'll get to film the event so that I can upload it on my YouTube channel. But it's a fun thing, actually. In the beginning of my PhD, I participated in this fun thing that they were doing in Leeds, which was called Pub HD, which is a combination of pub and PhD, and there were PhDs presenting their research in a pub. And it was quite fun. I met a mathematician there, and he was so funny and made his research sound extremely fascinating. You wouldn't think that mathematics could be particularly entertaining, but he was really entertaining. Let me go back to the questions. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. So Tony Knuckle says, Dr. Puka, can esotericism be separated from mysticism? I know that my question may look a little bit vague and maybe hard to answer. Oh, Tony, I will try and answer, and then you can tell me whether I managed to address what you were interested in knowing. So, can esotericism be separated from mysticism? Fun enough, this was a conversation that I was having yesterday with Suzanne. When we were on a walk, and I think that quite often there is the perception that esotericism or magic practice is different from mysticism, and for some people magic is kind of strictly related, especially for those who are not practitioners. I would say the popular perception sometimes is that people that practice magic are interested in altering their reality or acquiring certain powers, and it is more about the mundane, living the mundane and experiencing the world in a specific way, in a way controlled to a certain degree. But I've always argued, even in a discussion with a former professor that was specialized in Buddhism, I've always argued that actually there is mysticism underpinning. Oh, thank you, Existentialism, for your donation. I've always argued that there is mysticism in magic and esotericism. I think that they can be disentangled, but they can also be practiced together. I think that that's kind of the same with a lot, if not all, religious practices. I mean, you can be a Christian and just go to the church and just attend to the most practical and mundane aspects of your religiosity, or you could also have a mystical experience or seek mystical experiences within that religious framework. And also you have people that are extremely, so I think that it really depends. It's not a matter of one religious practice as opposed to another. I think that all practices that are somewhat religious or spiritual, that's another big topic, would be the difference between spiritual and religious, and that's another thing that is often discussed among academic circles. And I'd say that when you have a religious practice or a religious tradition, it's really up to the person how they experience it. It is about how you want to experience it. Do you want to experience from a mystical point of view? And so it's not just about changing on or having a certain experience in your daily life, but also work on your higher self, soul, going beyond your ego or beyond your mundane eye. Depends, of course, on the religious framework how you conceptualize this, but usually mysticism tends to unity. If I had to describe what mysticism is a way to go beyond your usual perception as something separate, towards a perception of you as a unity, as going, as with a sense of expansion of whatever you perceive to be, to become something greater, wider. So yeah, I think the answer is that I think you can they can be separated, but they can also be practiced together. It really depends on the practitioner. It depends on the person. What is that the person is interested in? Is it just a love spell or a money spell, money drawing spell, or is it to grow towards your spiritual path, or have a certain experience that goes beyond your mundane ones? So I think that it really depends on the person, but Esotericism is very varied and encompasses them both, I think. Let me see if there are other questions. Oh, Radori says the first video you did on chaos magic is where I decided to rebrand the name as Chaos Shaman due to my background and understanding. Oh, I'm glad it was useful for your personal experience. Studio Noir says, have you ever path worked with any deity from the Greco-Roman current? And what's your take on Medusa? As most of you know, I think I don't really share my personal beliefs and personal practices, because this space is about the academic study of Esotericism and magic. But I can say that, being Italian, Greek-Roman deities are, of course, very popular among Italian pagans, and especially I'd say the Greek deities are particularly popular in southern Italy, and the Roman ones in central Italy, unsurprisingly. Oh, thank you, Hank, for your donation. So yeah, of course you have that a lot of pagans tend to work with these deities. And what is my take on Medusa? On Medusa as a mythical, historical entity, or how contemporary pagans work with her? I don't think I've come across with any pagan in Italy that works specifically on Medusa. Sounds like a difficult entity to work with based on the myth of Medusa. But yeah, let me know if there's something specific that you want to know. Thomas Tate says, "Can you explain chaos magic?" I have a few videos on chaos magic. In fact, I think I have a playlist on chaos magic. So I think it could be helpful for you to check that out. But chaos magic I think it's quite popular because it's a free form of magic that sort of rejects the institutionalized magic practices and is very individualistic. And I think there is a tendency towards that in contemporary esotericism to have individually tailored practices, and that's one of the reasons as to why I speculate that eclectic Wicca has become so popular, because he gave people and practitioners the chance to individually tailor their practice. So you have certain general broad guidelines or broad principles, but then you can make it your own practice very easily. It's quite malleable. And chaos magic is similar in that respect. And you can create your own correspondences, you create your own sigils, you can even, elevate an entity or a TV show character to a deity for the purpose of a ritual to evoke, that kind of archetypal energy within you. So chaos magic is extremely, I'd say, individualistic, or allows you to have a very individually tailored practice that doesn't have to rely on an institution or a dogma of any sort, in the perception of contemporary chaos magicians especially. Oreziel says, "Is the content on Hecate still something you're working on?" Yes, it is something that I'm still working on. I will be doing more research in the next months. And actually, I also want to use TikTok as a way of gathering data. It's just that I have to I was once again talking about this with Suzanne yesterday. Suzanne Owen is my former supervisor and now colleague. And she does amazing research in indigenous religions if you want to check out her work. And I also have interviews with her on the YouTube channel. But yeah, we were talking about, I was asking, how can I, use data collected from TikTok? Because when you do academic research, there are lots of parameters that you have to abide by. And so one of the things is to get ethical approval, but there are also other things, and I'm really not sure how you can use TikTok in that way. I managed to use Facebook for my PhD, not for all of it, of course, but there was a small bit of data that came from a Facebook group, and I managed to get approval on that. So I have to see whether I can get it approved in terms of data collection and analysis. And but it would be interesting to study the perception and how contemporary pagans are reimagining the goddess Hecate in the witch talk era. I'm sure that Andrew is enthusiastic about it. Andrew is one of my patrons. He's very fond of TikTok. He's actually the reason why I'm on TikTok, because he persuaded me to be there. So, Joao has a question. Would you be open to cover Esotericism in the world of graphic novels and comic books? Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, Alejandro Jodorowsky, and Jean Giraud come to mind. Oh yeah, that would be so interesting. Yes. Yeah, I definitely like to cover those. Absolutely. As I said, it's just that when I move a bit far from what I have to do for my academic research, it requires more time, because sometimes I make videos on things that I'm already studying, either for lectures or for papers that I'm writing, or side research for research that I'm doing academically. And in other cases, I make videos on things that I'm not really currently studying, and so in that case, it requires more time to do all the research and the reading. But in terms of the topics, I'm absolutely fascinated and interested. Anecdotally, I was once in Paris, and there was the son of Jodorowsky who was reading the tarot cards in this cafe in Paris. Yeah, and I went there because I found it interesting. So yeah, Jodorowsky is an interesting character. I think it would be interesting to make a video on him as well, but also on the other ones that you mentioned, Joao. Joshua von Noctis is asking, I am looking for more information on techno-paganism, as I feel Konsu is leading me down that path. I saw your video, but do you have any information on the subject that is non-Wiccan focused? That's an interesting question. So the thing is that with techno-paganism, there isn't much research really. And it seemed to me, when I did research on the matter, it seemed to me that the term was more used in the 90s and up to the 2000s, and then after that, it was not really used that much anymore. So, but yeah, correct me if I'm wrong and there's something that I should look up. But yeah, that's something that would be interesting to investigate more. But what counts as techno-paganism? That's another thing. Is it paganism on social media? Because in that case, of course, you start to have papers. There are papers even on the Pomegranate. The Pomegranate is the Journal of Pagan Studies. Oh, thank you, Montaigne Harpy, for your donation. Is the International Journal for Pagan Studies, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure if it has international or not, but it is the most famous journal in pagan studies, the Pomegranate. And there are 2 papers that I recall on Instagram, and is it Facebook? I think it is Facebook. And so it is paganism, on the social media platform. So there is interest, and there are some papers. There are a few papers, not many, on the matter. But I am not sure if that is what counts as techno-paganism. Maybe one of the things that we need. Maybe I could write that article on the Pomegranate. What is techno-paganism? Because I think that otherwise, it's difficult to answer the question. So I'm assuming that you mean by techno-paganism forms of paganism that use the social media platforms or the online world, or to interact and sometimes to practice. But let me know what you mean more specifically, because otherwise it's difficult to explain. I would imagine that techno-paganism is paganism that lives on the internet and flourishes on the internet. But then, would it count as techno-paganism if they also meet in person? If they only use the internet to, for instance, meet each other, and then they to acknowledge that they exist, and then they meet up in person. Would it count as techno-paganism, or would it only count as techno-paganism if they only interact and practice online or through technology and social media? So to what extent is techno-paganism, and when, where do you draw the line between paganism and techno-paganism? That would be another interesting question. So Arke says, Dr. Puka, how does specifically theistic Satanism, for example, of the Temple of Set, relate to non-Satanist, other newish left-hand occultist ideas? For example, chaosism and so on. Any connection there? I'm not sure I'm able to answer that question. So, theistic Satanism, Temple of That, relate to non. That's a difficult question to answer because non-Satanist group usually don't want to be associated with Satanists. And even when there are parallels, non-satanic groups tend to be averse to the idea of being associated with them. So, for instance, what comes to mind is in Italy there is a form of Satanism that could be translated as spiritual Satanism, the way they call it. And they include the wheel of the year, the Wiccan wheel of the year, and also some aspects of the goddess and the god, you know, the idea of these duodeistic elements in some cases. But mostly there's the wheel of the year and they celebrate it. And so you see parallels with paganism, and sometimes they identify as pagans, but then the pagan community doesn't want them to be associated with pagans. So if you were to analyze that from as a historian of religion or as a religious studies scholar, you would see, you know, this tradition calls itself spiritual Satanism, but they include pagan elements. Is that pagan? That's another big question, and it depends on your methodology. I would say it is not paganism, but I think that theistic Satanism has elements of can have parallels with other traditions, but other, especially left-hand path traditions. But it's difficult to draw these parallels because, first of all, I would have to know exactly what traditions we are talking about, and second, it's a bit of a minefield because of the fact that quite often you find that non-satanic groups don't want to be associated with satanic groups. As a religious studies scholar, I find Satanism very fascinating, but I also acknowledge that non-satanic traditions tend to have this kind of attitude. I'm not sure it answers your question, but I hope it does, at least in part. Andrew says, in the 60s, techno-paganism was boiling your cauldron on an electric stove instead of an open fire. Yes, I think that, yeah, every age has its innovations, and yeah, that's funny. Let me see if there are other questions. Oh, Joshua Von Noctis says techno-paganism as explained to me. Oh, thank you, James Roland, for your donation. Techno-paganism, as explained to me by Konsu and through some light reading, is the use of technology in ritual and seeing the spiritual side of technology, not really uploading a video to TikTok. Well, yeah, I didn't mean uploading a video to TikTok, but what if you cast a spell through TikTok? That, I guess, would classify as that. Yeah, I think it's an interesting subject, and there isn't much academic research on it, but it should be more studied. I think that I will do more research on that, academically. I mean, because it's becoming more, more and more relevant to the community. Joao says using a candle could count as using a technology. Oh yeah, Cyberhenge. The book that Joao is mentioning in the chat, Cyberhenge is an academic book, and I remember it because I read it for my video on techno-paganism. But I think that what I mentioned in that video on techno-paganism is pretty much everything there is, to my knowledge, from an academic point of view. And the thing is that a lot of you know this, but I will say once again that one of the things about my YouTube channel and my project here is that I only include knowledge that is based on peer-reviewed scholarship, which is something that I also put in the here, because I think that sometimes viewers can be confused, what is exactly that I talk about when it comes to witchcraft. And one of the of the main traits of my project is that I address, the information that you get is not my own interpretation on primary sources or books. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I chose to use this platform to deliver academic and peer-reviewed scholarship on the matter. So for instance, if there is a book written by a practitioner on techno-paganism and there are no papers or studies on the matter, I wouldn't use that material or my own interpretation unless it is a study that I will carry out myself, and in that case, it would count as academic research. I don't know whether in the future I will change my methodology, but as of now, that is the direction that I want my project to follow. So that makes me a bit more limited because I know many more things than the ones that I can cover on my YouTube channel, just because perhaps there are some things that have not been studied yet academically. But yeah, that is the kind of methodology that I use. So it has limitations, but it also has, I think, positives, which is that when you find information on this platform, you know that it comes from academic scholarship, if that is what you're interested in. Not that there's anything wrong with it, being interested in works written by practitioners, of course. It's just that is the methodology of my project and of my channel. As an academic in the field, I think that I also want to help my research field, because of course it's not like the study of esotericism and magic, is super popular in academia. There is, luckily it is growing, but it is still a very small subject area. And I think that by disseminating the papers and the studies and the research that are done in this research field, I'm hoping to also help the field grow and make people aware that we exist to begin with, and that the work we do matters, because otherwise it's also very difficult to find universities that would back your research or find funding. So it's a complicated word to study this kind of matters, but luckily it's getting slowly better. Let me see if there are other questions. Cern Green says, hi, Dr. A. Thank you for Dr. A. It's funny because I get called all sorts of doctors, something Dr. P, Dr. Puka. Doc, Dr. A. Are you getting a lot of positive or negative feedback about your Stregheria video? I thought it was great. Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad that you liked it. I was a bit scared of releasing that video because I know that, well, I got overwhelming positive feedback from Italians. There was actually there's an Italian pagan that sent me a message saying that I don't know if I can say it live. She said that I have balls of steel for releasing that video. That's what she said. And you know, I've got a lot of Italian pagans that sort of applauded me and said, "Oh, finally, finally!" Positive things to say about my video. I didn't get a lot of backlash. There were a few that were disappointed by the fact that I said that Stregheria is not Italian witchcraft, but the majority is, you know, all the feedback was positive, I think. So it went better than I expected. I was a bit worried, but yeah, I think that I'm happy that I made that video. I hope it helps people, and I don't want to, you know, if, as I mentioned in that video as well, if a specific practice brings value to you of any kind, I think that religions and spiritualities have as their main goal to provide meaning perhaps to people and help us navigate the world and life and reality in a meaningful way, and enrich our experiences. So if somebody finds value in that, you know, I wouldn't, of course, judge that at all. It's just that when there are certain claims that are not backed by any research, then of course a scholar should point them out without meaning any disrespect towards those who find value in that specific practice. Abnormal says, have you worked with Egyptian gods? If so, how did you go about doing it? I have a video on Heka. In terms of whether I work with Egyptian gods, I don't think I'm answering that, because as I mentioned earlier, I don't share my personal beliefs and practices. But Egyptian gods are very fascinating, especially the Necheru, which are the ones of the family where Isis, Osiris, Mat, yeah, they are very fascinating. And I come from Naples in Italy, and there are a few temples of Isis, for instance, in Naples that some of them have later become churches, Catholic churches. But there is an influence of the Egyptian culture there, which is fascinating. But yeah, I find Egyptian gods very interesting. I haven't done research on them academically, but there is definitely research. I think that what's his name? There is a scholar that now I can't recall. So if you write me a comment after the video is after we go offline, if you leave me a comment, William Budge, maybe? No, I don't want to say the wrong name, but there's a scholar that has written a lot about Egyptian magic, and that's quite fascinating. Andrew says a candle is man-made object and is therefore technology, and in ancient times was very expensive. Yeah, that reminds me of the perceived, and I underline perceived, dichotomy between artificial and natural. I think that, well, you don't find that only in paganism and witchcraft communities, but even outside of those. But you know, this dichotomy between, or perceived dichotomy, I would say, I think it's a perceived dichotomy between the artificial and the natural. Yeah, but maybe some things are, because some things are man-made, and so they would be artificial, and others are natural, and they would be considered, especially for certain practitioners, they have a higher status if they are deemed natural as opposed to artificial. And so if you have that kind of dichotomous mindset, and also a system of value that prefers one over the other, then technology would be a way of undermining or diminishing your or giving less value to your practice if you use technology instead of using the mundane things, the non-technological things. Do we have non-technological things really? as Andrew was pointing out, perhaps we don't, but yeah, that's also one of the things. If I ever research techno-paganism, which I think I will, one of the things that might be interesting to address is this matter of power, this perception of power, and whether there is more power in things that are deemed as non-technological, and even there, where do you draw the line between the technology and the non-technology? But I think that maybe in the past there were more practitioners that thought that technology is, in a way, undermines or makes the practice less poetic and less magical, but that perhaps comes from an idea of a disenchanted perception of technology and man-made things. Whereas if a practitioner is endorsing an animistic worldview, then everything is sentient and has a spirit, including technology. So it is more a matter of working with energies of different kind. So let me see if there are other questions. Oh, thank you, Almond Gjerden, for your donation. Trying to see if there are other questions. Inquisitor Vex is asking, I'm feeling a little disconnected with my religion, paganism. Do you know any small minor rituals or practices I could use so I can feel like I'm actually practicing my religion? So as a scholar, I don't quite give advice on rituals, but what I can say is that I'm trying to recall, what practitioners have said in, during my fieldwork. And one of the things is that paganism is quite often associated with being nature worshipping. And it's not just the worship of nature, but it's also connecting to nature in a way that allows the person, the pagan, the practitioner, to feel like they are something more than what they normally on a daily basis feel they are. So perhaps, based on what practitioners usually do, a good starting point to get reconnected to your religiosity is to find connection with nature again, being more in nature, or celebrating the equinoxes and the solstices and the full moons and the new moons. These are practices that pagans do, not only because those moments in the year and in the month are considered to be sacred, but also because by in those celebrations, they get in tune with the season. So there's a correspondence between what happens outside in the world and on the earth and what happens inside. So by celebrating those moments, you are reconnecting yourself with that, with the energy and with that time. And so you sort of get reconnected to the seasons inside by, in a way, worshipping and connecting to the seasons outside. And there's this sort of macrocosm connection that happens again. So I guess that would be my advice, perhaps to find, to just start by working on your connection with the natural world. Anything that inspires you and inspires wonder and makes you feel like you are alive and you are, vibrating. Sometimes, at least I tend to get that feeling when I'm in nature, and especially when there are certain trees. I really like trees, and there are certain trees that sort of make me feel like, sort of a bit of electricity. I don't know how to explain it, but maybe if you have anything like that, that could be a starting point, like a specific thing, whether it be trees or rivers or but something in nature that is sort of a gateway to get reconnected. I hope that helps. Joshua says, paganism in and of itself is not a religion. That's a big topic. Are you referring to one of the pagan faiths, Esotericism? So, shall we open Pandora's box? So I would say, Joshua, that as a scholar, I would say that paganism is a religion. But I don't know if I have mentioned in a few videos in the past that there is something in anthropology called the emic and the ethic perspective. So the emic perspective is how practitioners talk about their practices, and the ethic perspective is scholars. When scholars, study practitioners' practice, they sort of try and see whether what they say corresponds to a certain description or a certain dogma when there is one, or with the historical developments. So the ethic perspective is the perspective of the researcher that goes beyond what one or multiple practitioners say and identifies the patterns rather than what the single people say, and also the historical side, the historical documents or the certain definitions that are already present in literature. So the matter of whether paganism is a religion has a lot to do with what is believed to be a religion. And what is at the moment quite discussed in religious studies circle among scholars is that now slowly the term religion is losing its strict association with Abrahamic religions. So if you have a certain idea of what religion is that resembles the three monotheisms, then you would say paganism is not a religion because it doesn't resemble that. But is it really the case that religion has to the term religion has to be strictly associated with those religions? Or is it perhaps the case that there are many different forms of religions and that the term could be, in a way, reclaimed and claimed by those who do not practice those monotheisms? And one of the reasons why perhaps some practitioners are moving towards re-employing the term religion that has been it has become, for a long time, practitioners were averse to use the term religion because it was associated to dogma and institutionalized religions, things resembling the monotheisms, and pagans, especially in the past, certainly didn't want to be associated with that. But the thing is that in our society, religion is a social and a political actor. and spirituality isn't. So if you have a religious belief and a religious practice that is not the one that that doesn't resemble a monotheism, and you call it spirituality, you are removing yourself from the conversation. And it is, I think, and this is the realm of my opinion, I think that it is detrimental to the community, because it's not like, because removing yourself from the conversation will not help the the community of those who practice that religion or that spirituality, because you as a non-religious practice, you have less rights, and you cannot enter the conversation even in terms of the with other people in your society, and it is not recognized. Spirituality is not a term that is recognized as a social and a political actor. So whereas religion is, and so perhaps in terms of the rights that practitioners can get, including the status of religion that has its own benefits from a social and political point of view. Apart from that, it could also be a matter, and it is a matter for some practitioners already. It is a matter of reclaiming a term that doesn't necessarily have to be only belong to certain religions, and yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I hope the opening the Pandora box has not created too much damage, but I'm open to to having different views from you guys. But these are conversations that are happening among religious studies scholars. I can tell you. The definition of the term religion is already been reshaped in academia by using discourse analysis as a methodology, and especially those who don't study, like myself, the monotheisms, but we study paganism, shamanism, other witchcraft, other forms of practice that include religious elements, and whether they are or not religions. In some cases, it's a bit blurred whether they count as religion. In other cases, when you remove the strict association between religion and monotheistic one of the three monotheistic ones that are the most practiced around the world, then you can see that they are indeed religions. And then you wonder, why do practitioners are averse to using the term? And it can be for all sorts of reasons, sometimes personal reasons. If you grow up in a family that has an idea of religion that is very strict and binding and dogmatic, then you associate the term with those elements. And then whether you classify something as a religion or not also has personal connotations and personal associations. Thank you for the donation, Marcus Roark. So yeah, I think it's complicated, and that's why it's important to also have the point of view of scholars on the matter, because I think that scholars in religious studies are extremely respectful of practitioners. I think that in the past, you had Fraser and Tyler and these armchair anthropologists that sort of treated practitioners as these, backwardly people doing irrational stuff. But now religious studies scholars are extremely respectful of practitioners. So that it's not really a matter of that. And also we have lots of, even from an ethical standpoint, research works in a very strict way. But that said, being respectful doesn't mean that a researcher needs to endorse what every single practitioner says and how they and how they talk about their practices. I think the role of the scholar is also to go beyond the individual classifications and help understand the practice from I wouldn't say objective because I don't like the term objective, but from a more scholarly, a wider perspective that also is related to the to the what is happening in the scholarly world. Oh, hi Justin. I can see that Justin is in the chat. Esoterica. Great Q&A, Dr. Puka. Wonderful to work together on the spare episode. Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed your video, and as always to collaborate with you, Justin or Dr. Sledge. And yeah, I look forward to our next one. We will see what our next collaboration will bring us. But I look forward more to seeing you in person. We definitely need to find a way to meet up. Oh, Thomas Dolcelli has a question. Are you going to do a group discussion like you did during your 10K subscribers with other PhDs? Oh, yeah, I know what you're referring to. It was an event like a roundtable discussion with other scholars on, I think it was on death and afterlife. Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, that would be good to organize another one of those. Yeah, maybe next month I might try and organize one of those. But when I will be at 2 conferences, as I said in the beginning of the live stream. I'll be at 2 conferences in Ireland between June and July. So I will definitely have interviews and talks with scholars over there. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think in this moment in time, I'm so starved of traveling and seeing people that I just want to go everywhere. So, but yeah, let me see what else is in the chat. Oh, Justin says, let's do it. Would be great to hang out. You can show me around Naples. Oh, yeah, if you come to Naples, I can bring you to Nola so that you can see the place where Giordano Bruno was born. It's not impressive, I should say, but you can drink the Neapolitan water and get enchanted yourself. There's still a joke running on Neapolitan water because I realized that all the magicians of the Renaissance magicians, the Italian Renaissance magicians, are all from Naples. And then I realized that the most famous anthropologist and the only one really that studied magic in the 20th century, whose name is it's escaping me now why, but he was also from Naples, and why I can't remember his name now. I talk about him all the time. Anyway, I've blanked out. So yeah, it's fascinating. There are so many philosophers and magicians that were from Naples. So we said maybe it's something in the water. So Ernesto De Martino, that's the name. Ernesto De Martino is perhaps the most famous anthropologist in Italy, and he studied magic. And he was also from Naples. So I don't know what's going on there, but oh yeah, Hank said you could fund the trip to Naples with magic water sales. Count me in for a jug. Yes. And Andrew, of course, says we need Neapolitan water as merch. Yeah, then I would have to see whether to get that water. In Naples, there are lots of public, fountains where you can have drinkable water. But yeah, it's funny. But yeah, Justin, of course, if you ever come to Italy or to Naples, it'd be really fun to show you around, and also to eat delicious food, because we Italians are obsessed with food. I can see in the chat a lot of people talking about magic water. Yes. I'll donate magic Colorado snow. Yeah, I'd also love to come to the US. I've never been to the US. Interestingly enough, I was supposed to go to Boston for the AAR conference a couple of years ago, but then the pandemic hit and that was not possible. It was moved online. And I was supposed to also meet Andrew from Religion for Breakfast because he was finishing his PhD at Boston University. So it was a pity that that didn't happen. I have to see whether I'm able to go to the next AAR conference. The AAR conference is the American Academy of Religion. I'm sorry, I forget that these acronyms are only known to other academics. But it's difficult to get funding for a trip to the US. It's quite expensive. That's the matter. And at the moment I don't have, but I had more budget for these kind of things when I was a PhD than now, interestingly enough. But yeah, I'd love to go to the US and to the AR conference. I have to see if the call for papers is still open. Oh, Existentialism 99 says something in Italian. Tutti a tavola a mangiare, which means everyone at the table to eat. So, yeah, I think it's almost 10 past 6 my time, and I hope I answered all of your questions. If I have forgotten any of your questions, please leave them in the comment section, and I will get back to them as soon as possible. Oh yeah, perhaps Salem. I'd like to go to Salem, New Orleans, because those are the typical things to do when you are interested in magic, I guess. But I like to visit anywhere in the US, really. And so, yeah, I think it's time to wrap up the live stream. Thank you, Justin, if you are already there, for coming over. And if you guys don't know Esoterica, but I think you do, of course, go over there and subscribe to his channel, because his work is amazing. And also, he's a great friend. So, and thank you everybody for coming along for the live stream. It's always nice to interacting with you guys. And if you are watching this, whether it is live or offline, please consider supporting my work. If you like my content and you want me to keep it going, I would really appreciate it if you considered supporting me and my work with a one-off PayPal donation by joining memberships or my inner symposium on Patreon. I can see a few of my patrons already in the chat, which is fantastic, and it's a great community. I think that if you join, you will not regret it for a second. And Andrew, who is in the chat, also leads a book club, and we have chats and conversations on Discord in our server, so it's fun. Please consider joining. And otherwise, you can also support by liking the video. So if you like this live stream, or if you are liking the video, if you watch it afterwards, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so that you always get a nice notification when I upload a new video. And stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now, and thanks for coming or for watching.